Hello students, we are going to start today with class 12th, first chapter, that is reproduction in organisms. You all must be familiar with the term reproduction. Now in this chapter we are going to talk about the other terms associated with reproduction and why reproduction is so significant. You all know that organisms are found on this planet, and these organisms live for a certain period of time. When we say they are living for a certain period of time, that is, they take birth, during which later on they develop and finally they die. So what do we call that period from the natural birth to the natural death? That is known as the lifespan. So lifespan is the period from birth to the natural death of an organism. And the lifespan of various organisms vary to a large extent. When we talk about the lifespan of a bacterium such as E. coli, the lifespan is only for 24 hours. And within that time, it takes birth and dies also. Whereas certain other animals live for long duration. For example, the mango tree. If you compare it, it lives for a much longer duration. The mayfly has a lifespan of about 1 day, that is 24 hours, within which period it will take birth and it will die. So the lifespan of an organism varies. It doesn't matter. It is not about the size or there is any relation to the size. It is different for different kinds of organisms which exist around on this planet. So during that lifespan, for the continuation of the species, it is necessary that an organism must reproduce. And that is what is known as reproduction. The reproduction, if we say, it is the process or it is a biological process in which an organism gives rise to young ones of its own kind. So what does that mean? That means that during the process of or during the lifespan, an organism needs to reproduce. Now, why is reproduction a very important phenomena? Reproduction is an important phenomena because it helps in the continuation of the species. It is very, very important for the species to continue, and for the continuation it needs to reproduce of its own kind. The second important point about the reproduction is it helps in the introduction of genetic variation, which is the very much basis of evolution, because this genetic variation brings about the evolution, which is a gradual process. Although we know that the variation is mostly found in the sexual reproduction, but not much in asexual reproduction. Also, those plants and fungi which reproduce with the help of by the formation of the spores, this the dispersal of the spores helps in avoiding the competition, because the spores are dispersed far and wide. There are various means of reproduction, and spore formation is one of the methods of reproduction. So during that process, the spores or the other structures which are reproductive structures which are formed can travel far and wide, and as a result the organism has a wide dispersal area, avoiding the competition among the members of the same species. So we find that reproduction is important, and during the lifespan of an organism it needs to reproduce for the continuation of its own type. Now, when we are talking of the term reproduction, it is interesting, or rather, you all must be aware that reproduction is of two types, that is, the asexual reproduction and the sexual reproduction. So, here In this video, we'll be talking about the various types of reproduction of asexual type and asexual reproduction and the sexual reproduction. So when we talk of asexual reproduction, it is also called as agamogenesis. Agamogenesis because the term means there is no formation and fusion of the gametes. Here in the asexual reproduction, the gamete formation is absolutely not there and only one parent is involved in the reproduction process, giving rise to the new or the young ones or the offsprings. Now, when we talk of the organisms that we need to or that multiply by reproduction, there is one interesting question that comes to my mind that when we say that during the lifespan an organism takes birth and dies, do amoeba or is amoeba an immortal organism? Because it never dies. The reason is it is known as immortal. It is an exception to the lifespan because this amoeba on maturation divides by the parent amoeba divides by binary fission into two daughter cells. And here actually there is no death of the parent organism, but it divides into two on reaching maturation. So here the single celled organisms are an exception to the mortality because there is no mortality. They are immortal in a way because the parent body divides. So here when we talk of the asexual method of reproduction, as I said, a sexual method of reproduction involves only one parent. That is, only single parent is involved during this phenomena. Also, it is very important to understand that during the asexual reproduction, there is no formation or fusion of the gametes which is taking place, and here, the mitotic division is mainly responsible for the formation of the organism. So, the individuals formed are identical to one another and also to the parent. The asexual reproduction will result in only genetically similar, morphologically similar individuals, and those individuals which are morphologically similar and genetically similar are known as clones. So clones is a term we use for these organisms. And also they don't have much genetic variation. Since one parent is involved in the process, there is no genetic variation possible, and hence these organisms have not evolved much during the phase of or during the environmental changes, and it is also referred to as somatogenic reproduction. Now, the unit of reproduction over here in these organisms may be the entire parent body. That means the entire parent, as in the case of amoeba, on maturation, the amoeba divides into two and forms the daughter cells, or the organism may have fragment or a part of the parent body that is taking part in the reproduction actually, and rest of the cells are not affected. For example, the bryophyllum leaf, the notches have the buds, or the hydra where the bud develops. Only a part of the parent body is taking part or playing a major role in the reproduction. Then a single cell of the body, the spore formation. These are various methods of asexual reproduction. Now also the asexual reproduction, since it involves only one parent, it is a rapid means of reproduction. That means the organisms which are produced are more in number as compared to the organism that reproduce by sexual method of reproduction. Then it is found, this is the asexual reproduction is mostly found in single-celled organisms or organisms which have very basic body design. For example, the members of Monera, Protista, and these organisms, fungi and lower group of animals, and other plants are also found to have this method of asexual reproduction. So let us now discuss about some of the methods of asexual or some of the structures of asexual reproduction. Now, these cells which we were talking about in the case of asexual reproduction, which take part, are very, very important because they help in the formation of the new organism. So there are various structures such as the spore formation, that is we have studied about the zoospores, which are basically motile, and these motile spores are capable of developing new organism, or the gemule formation in the case of sponges, the conidia formation, the formation of the bud. All these are various examples of asexual reproduction. Now, when we talk of the sexual reproduction, let us first start with fission. Now, fission, all of you know, is of two types majorly. It is binary fission and the multiple fission. In the case of binary fission, when we are talking, the binary fission is a type of fission in which one parent organism divides into two, and two daughter cells are similar. For example, amoeba, in which the amoeba divides into two. But in certain times, when there are not favorable conditions, then amoeba forms a cyst around itself, and that is known as encystation. It is to avoid the adverse climatic conditions or unfavorable conditions. During the favorable conditions, amoeba reproduces by normally binary fission. Now, the binary fission over here takes place in amoeba in any of the axis. That means it is not compulsory or it is not mandatory that the fission will take place along one plane. It can happen at any plane, and therefore it is not fixed in the case of amoeba. The multiple fission is a condition in which where the parent cells or organism divide several times and produces multiple individuals, more than two cells, and it results into the formation of large number of offsprings. It is seen in plasmodium, and the newly formed cells or the divided cells are enclosed within a body, and which are then released by the bursting. The body that encloses these cells, the newly formed cells, which will later develop on as individuals, are found to be present within a cyst. Then budding is another, a very common example, which is found in hydra, in which, or yeast also is a good example where budding takes place. Hydra, all of you are familiar. The hydra develops a bud, and this bud gradually develops tentacles, and on reaching a certain stage, this will be developing as an individual hydra. So budding is again a phenomena which is taking place in certain organism. Then we have the fragmentation, which you have studied earlier, that is spirogyra, in which on reaching the maturity, the fragments, the mature individual breaks up into fragment, and each fragment develops into an individual. Regeneration is one of the another example of the asexual reproduction. We also have the formation or the certain areas, certain structures which are known as vegetative propagules. These vegetative propagules are found, or these are the actually, this is the method of vegetative propagation in which the organism has certain areas or certain regions. These certain areas or certain regions are specific, and these are capable of giving or forming the new individuals, which are similar to the parent plant, of course. So these are known as vegetative propagules. Vegetative propagules, actually, if we want to define, these are specialized structures which are formed from the somatic cells of the parent and are capable of developing new organism. For example, the eyes, if you have seen potato, there are certain marks over there and which are known as eyes. These are the areas which are capable of developing the plant. If we take the portion containing an eye and separate it out and put it inside the soil, you will find the plant germinating from that particular area. You must have seen this during the rainy season also. Then the rhizome, then bryophyllum leaves. We have the notches. The leaves of bryophyllum has the notches where the bud formation takes place. After the development of the root, the bud detaches and falls on the ground, and this will develop as a new plant. Also, let's talk about another vegetative propagule, that is an offset. Offset is it is seen in the aquatic plants where the system of leaves develop, and after the development of certain part it breaks, forming the new individual. So these are various specialized structures which are known as vegetative propagules. Water hyacinth is a good example, and it is actually, water hyacinth is known as terror of Bengal because it was actually brought as to increase the or to enhance the aesthetic appeal of stagnant waters, but it turned out, because it multiplies very fast, as we have discussed, that asexual reproduction, the number of individuals produced are much large in number. As a result, we found that now the water bodies in Bengal mainly are completely having the water hyacinth, which is an aquatic plant, and due to its overgrowth, it has blocked the sunlight and the oxygen which is required by the aquatic plants and animals, and it has affected adversely the life of those aquatic organisms, causing many fishes to die. So it is a rather a disadvantage when we are talking of the water hyacinth reproducing asexually. Then when we talk of certain plants, the nodes are the areas where the plants can develop, for example, the money plant, the sugarcane plant. So we find that asexual reproduction, there are various methods by which it can reproduce, the organism can reproduce. But this is found in normally the organism having low level of organization, or organisms that have simple basic body design. Thank you.